Okay, here we go. Hi, my name is Rob Ward. Um, I'm currently a student of sexuality education at the Sexual Health Alliance, and well, let's get right into it. This is Iced Out: The Effects of Operation Metro Surge on the Sex Lives of Minnesotans. A little bit about me, as I mentioned. My name is Rob Ward. I am a student of sexuality education at the Sexual Health Alliance. I use he, him pronouns. I am a cishet white man. I'm originally from the Chicago area, but I have been in Minneapolis for 12 years. I have a bachelor's in theater honors from Gustavus Adolphus College in St. Peter, Minnesota. I'm an award winning theater artist. I'm also a game designer in my spare time, and I also am married with two cats. Their names are Gertrude and Snowboots. So, a little bit about Operation Metro Surge. In December of 2025, the Department of Homeland Security launched, quote, the largest immigration enforcement operation ever carried out. 4,000 federal agents from the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and Customs Border Patrol, CBP, were sent to the Twin Cities metro and its surrounding suburbs. About 4,000 people were arrested. Observers were targeted, followed, threatened, abused, and intimidated by these agents. This is Gertrude. Yes, she's not supposed to be here right now. My apologies. Yes. So, during this time, two Minnesotan observers, Alex Peretti and Renee Good, were shot and killed. Another man, Victor Manuel Diaz, died while in custody. The blatant abuses and refusals of the federal government to hold these agents accountable led to the largest protests in Minnesotan history. Even now, we're still dealing with the fallout. Immigrants are still afraid to leave their homes now, in June, and local businesses lost an estimated $81 billion in revenue. So I live in South Minneapolis, and my neighbors describe this entire atmosphere as, quote, like the George Floyd uprising, but different. There was no major riots, no massive destruction of property, but the tension, the paranoia, the anger, and the stress, it was very overwhelming. And it was this time when I realized my wife and we weren't having sex. I originally had a different idea for my Capstone project for sure, but this entire thing really put it killed it. It really killed it at this time. So I'm not going to be touching that project for a while. But because this happened, Metro Surge did. This gave me the idea of, are other people feeling the same way as I do? Are other people not having sex? So that led to this survey. The three main questions I had were: has Operation Metro Surge impacted sexual activity in the state of Minnesota? If yes, how has it affected sexual activity? And three, who did it impact the most? So my methodology included, my apologies, my first time doing a stream. My methodology was using an anonymous 26-question Google Forms survey. I asked about the frequency of sex and masturbation pre and post the Renee Good shooting. I used Facebook, Discord, and Messenger and word of mouth to get the word out. And I collected these survey results from the 1st of January 2026 to the 8th of February 2026. I used the data from 44 Minnesotan adults. I did have someone that was not a Minnesotan answer the survey. I excluded them because I didn't have enough people that were non-Minnesotans as a control group. Here we see, this is what an example of what I set up, how I'd reach out to people in the specifically SHA certification program group on Facebook. All right, moving on. This is what our respondents looked like. As we see, most of the respondents were between the ages of 25 to 44, almost overwhelmingly. Not a lot of people under the age of 24, nor a lot of people over the age of 55. So this was a general millennial to Gen X crowd that I reached out to, managed to get surveys from. I also had a very, very, very white group. 86.36 identified as white only, and there was only 2 people that did not identify at least being partially white. So this was a very Caucasian group. Many of the respondents were in relationships that were over 10 years long, over 5 years, over 10 years. We see many of them were married. And we also see that the majority of them were monogamous. But although 14 did identify as being polyamorous or non monogamous, 10 of which are currently in non monogamous relationships. Where I get the most diversity in this study was the gender identity and orientation of my respondents. As we see here, over half were identified as female, though we have quite a few people that are non-cis that identified themselves as being such on this survey. And here's a sexual orientation of respondents. As we see, this was and this is very fitting for Pride, a very LGBTQ plus friendly group. Very wide spectrum of sexual orientations here. I also asked about the libido of my respondents. Just getting an average, how high is your libido sex drive scale here? I use a Likert scale here. Most of them identified as being somewhat, most of them identified being somewhat in the middle here. We see the most identified one being the below average libido here. So we had a wide variety, though, as far as the sex drive of my respondents. I also asked what was the frequency of sex before and after the Renee Good killing. I used the killing of Renee Good as my touch point because it was the moment that this really came to a greater light on the national scale. That it really, it's the moment people woke up, to put it in bluntly. So as we see, beforehand, most people were having sex from at least less than once a week to 1 or 2 times a week, and that shifted dramatically down. As we see before that, there was about 7 respondents that were not having sex before January 7th. That jumped up to 21 right there. Same thing goes with masturbation. The frequency of masturbation, everyone masturbated. Everyone was masturbating before this metro surge occurred. But as we see, that also dropped dramatically as in frequency as this went on. So, in total, the findings here is for about, of the 44 respondents, when it comes to masturbation, the majority of which, 70.5%, saw a decrease in masturbation. 12 of them, 27.3, saw no change in their frequency of masturbation, and 1 respondent actually cited an increase. For the respondents not having, excluding the respondents not having sex before January 7th, as well as not having sex afterwards, we still see a sizable decrease. We see 66.7% decreasing in the frequency of sex, 20% seeing no change, and 5% seeing an increase. With these groups, so we're seeing an overall trend of decreasing in both sex and masturbation. Who was the most impacted? Here is a map of the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area and the surrounding counties. The majority of respondents that lived in either Minneapolis or St. Paul. We also have some from Bloomington and Burnsville, which is over here somewhere, from around these surrounding counties. I did have one respondent that was from Rochester, that's 87 miles southeast of Minneapolis. And what I saw here is that the closer you were to the metro area, the more of a decrease you were likely to see. In Minneapolis and St. Paul, we see almost an identical rate of decreasing, increasing, and not changing at all when it comes to the frequency of sex. In the outer metro, we see less of a decrease and less of a change overall. And the same goes for masturbation, except St. Paul. This was it was very similar to the rates of the change in frequency of sex beforehand. As we see, no one else except for this one person in St. Paul saw an increase in the frequency of masturbation. Apologies if I'm stuttering a little bit here. I'm just trying to get this cat out from under my feet. Anyway, but as we still see this trend here, we see that masturbation is decreasing overall as well. And we also see that people in longer term relationships saw less of a change. People in relationships 1 to 3 years long, most of which were people in committed relationships, saw the greatest increase in the frequency of sex, but they also saw the greatest decrease in the frequency of masturbation. And that could be because people that have been in relationships that are longer generally don't have as much sex as newer people in newer relationships. Across all self-reported levels of libido, we see the frequency of sex overall decrease. All respondents who answered a 1 on the libido scale, indicating a very low libido, reported a decrease in sex. Those who identified as having a moderate libido saw the greatest increase, though, at about 20%. So here we have the frequency of sex broken down by libido, and as we see, before and after, from all groups, from very low to very high, there has been a downshift in the frequency. In masturbation, we see this pattern. Excluding the one respondent in the very low libido category, every other group saw a large decrease in masturbation than in sex. 40% of the very low libido respondents saw a decrease in masturbation frequency, which makes them the smallest percentage of those who decreased. The moderate and higher libido categories have more respondents report a decrease in masturbation than those at the other end of the spectrum. In all, lower libido reported a bigger drop in sex, while higher libidos reported a greater drop in masturbation. And that can be represented here as we see all the very low libido, they dropped. All of them saw a decrease. And with masturbation, 80% of moderates saw that decrease as well. So we're going to talk about sexual orientation and gender identity in regards to this survey. Now, while I had a very homogeneous group when it came to the race, the age, even location of my respondents, I was very happy that there was a very diverse group in the majority of my respondents. Most of them identified as being LGBTQIA+. And these are the discoveries that we see. Right here, we have the change in frequency of sex between cis men and cis women. As we see with the change in frequency of sex, males saw a much bigger decrease. Females saw less of a change. That relationship is inverse, though, when it comes to masturbation. Cis females saw a greater decrease. Males saw less of a change. Overall, we see cisgender LGBTQIA plus people see a less change in a frequency of sex than heterosexual and non-cisgender respondents. Here are some interesting points that I found while doing this survey. No asexual respondent reported an increase. Half of bisexual females reported no change. 2 bisexual females reported an increase, and all other bisexual respondents reported a decrease. Only 1 heterosexual respondent reported an increase. All 4 heterosexual males reported a decrease. The most equal distribution was among the 3 gay male respondents here. Over half of pansexual respondents reported a decrease, and all 3 non-cis respondents reported a decrease as well. So we see quite a interesting array of responses here. And when we're looking at masturbation, again, LGBTQIA plus cisgender respondents saw less of a change overall. Here are some interesting points. 9 of 14 bisexual respondents cited a decrease. 60% of bisexual females reported a decrease. 5 of 7 heterosexual females cited a decrease. Gay males reported the least change overall. Of all 9 pansexual respondents cited a decrease, and overall males saw less of a change than females and non-cis respondents in terms of the frequency of masturbation. And that leads us to the question of why. Why was this happening? Keeping the focus of the presence of ICE and its effects on sexual activity in this community, respondents were asked if they felt ICE has negatively affected their libido. Here's what they said. The presence of ICE, this is one of my 4 questions that I asked towards the end of the survey. The presence of ICE in my community has negatively affected my libido. As we see, there's a wide variety of answers here, the most saying that they agree or strongly agree with that statement. Looking at the frequency of masturbation, the respondents who answered a 4 or 5 indicating they agree or strongly agree with this statement. 20% of them saw a decrease in masturbation. What's fascinating, too, is that the 5 who reported no change in masturbation reported a decrease in sex. So, overall, all of these people that have answered 4 or 5 have seen a decrease in one or both aspects of the activities covered in this survey. I also asked if the presence of ICE in my community has negatively affected my partner's libido. Again, we see a very wide variety of answers. Most of them saying 4 or 5, indicating they agree or strongly agree. And this is where we get into a little bit more of a mental health aspect. The presence of ICE in my community has negatively affected my mental health. Overwhelmingly, most people strongly agree. There is only 1 respondent that said they strongly disagree with this statement. And what's fascinating about that is that this is the person that lives in Rochester, which is 87 miles southeast of Minneapolis. So they were far out of the reach of Operation Metro Surge. In this one, the presence of ICE in my community has negatively affected my partner's mental health. Overwhelmingly, most people said they agreed or strongly agreed. A few people were a little bit more maybe, no, or strongly disagreed on that statement. Let's get some respondents' comments here, because I've taken comments from respondents that have identified having an increase, a decrease, or no change in either aspect of their sexual activity. So let's start off with the decreasing in the frequency of sexual activity here. Respondent 3 said, I do feel an active dread in my chest many times when I wake up, and I find it hard to want to be selfish and go on fun dates. The other two reported being at times in their lives when their relationship with sex have changed and seen it decrease since January 7th. For example, I went 5 years without sexual relations due to SA. In that time, my sense sexuality with others have greatly shifted, this is their words, not mine, to a space that I am still currently trying to figure out. And Respondent 23 indicated that they are trying to get pregnant and they were making progress toward this goal before January 7th and have felt stalled since then. Let's look at those that have cited an increase. So, Respondent 12 was trying to answer the best they could, starting a situation as a trans woman who recently started dating again in December, in part due to hormone changes. Respondent 14, like the rest of my community, I feel closer and more aligned with my partner at this time, which for us has meant an uptick in sex. And Respondent 32 said, personally, the stress of it all has led to more of a desperate need for closeness, support, and physical touch. So as we see, respondents 14 and 32 indicated that their increase in sexual activity was the result of a need to be closer to their partners. And if we look at no change here whatsoever, this is respondent 38. This is a respondent that has reported not having sex before and after January 7th, 2026. Seeking out romantic partners is the last thing in my mind right now. My date might turn out to be an ICE agent or be supportive of ICE's actions. The idea of even getting a coffee with such a person disgusts me. So as we see, in conclusion, the data from these 44 Minnesotan respondents indicate that the presence of ICE in their communities has impacted and changed the frequency of sexual activity. And for the majority of respondents, the presence of ICE in their community has caused a decrease in the frequency of both sex and masturbation. Now, looking back on this survey, if I was to run this back, again, first and foremost, I'd get someone to help me with this stream. Let's look at the conclusion of the most affected groups first. As we see, those that were in the metro area itself were the most affected, the Minneapolis-St. Paul residents. Those who were in newer relationships were more affected. People with very low libidos saw more of a drop in the frequency of sex. Those with moderate libido saw a drop in the frequency of masturbation at greater rates than the other identified groups of libidos. And cishet and non-cis respondents saw more of a change than cisgender LGBTQIA plus people. And that could be because most of my respondents were cis queer people. Now, what I would have done if I had to run this back, go back in time, and do this survey again. Hopefully I never have to do something like this again, because something like this wouldn't happen, but I would have sought out more respondents. I would have tried to get a more diverse group of respondents as well, particularly when it comes to race and age. I wouldn't dare ask about the legal status of someone in my survey just because that is, number one, none of my business, and number two, that poses a big privacy risk right there and a safety risk. I would have also loved to get more respondents from the greater Minnesotan region, Duluth, International Falls, Moorhead, Worthington, Mankato, etc. I would have asked questions about their political affiliation, their religion, their income level. Have they had any personal interactions with ICE agents or Border Patrol agents? I would have also asked if what their opinions of ICE and Border Patrol were. I would have also solicited more personal comments uh, because I found those to be very insightful, and I would have loved to have more of that data on hand. And if there was to be a future survey on a similar event, I would have also liked to see if a future event happened in, for example, August or June, something like that. How would that change? Because as we know, um, in a 2024 article on Astroglide, Dr. Justin Lehmiller notes that the week before Christmas and New Year's is a time with the most sexual activity, and after that, there's a slump in the frequency of sex in January and February when when Metro Surge was happening. So this survey took place during a cold slump. What would have happened if it took place in summer? All right, well, and with that, that is iced out. This has been my survey. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that this opened some eyes to what's been happening here in Minnesota. And I hope that y'all stay safe out there.